I'm Pat Torres. Welcome to The Story, and welcome to the first day of spring. You know, that means we're about 3 weeks away from the tax filing deadline for those of us who file once a year, which has us thinking about taxes. A certain amount is needed, of course, to pay for things like roads and police and schools, but in these parts, it seems to go well beyond that. And now, a group of citizens in Multnomah County who want to help renters facing eviction would like a new tax to pay for the renters' lawyers. Some are starting to wonder, how much is too much? That's our big story tonight. Portland has the second highest income tax rate in the country for top earners, second only to New York. That's according to a 2022 report by Ernst & Young. And many blame taxes here as a big reason for the recent exodus of residents. Which brings us to this latest tax proposal. It's a capital gains tax to pay for the lawyers to help tenants who are fighting eviction. And you've already let us know some of your thoughts on this one. Allison sent us this email today. I am a senior who depends on her investments to augment her retirement income. I am not rich. The thought of more taxes gives me the chills. And how about this from Veronica? After years of decreasing livability, my family and I have strongly considered moving out of the state and at a minimum out of Multnomah County. She goes on, when we heard about this measure, any doubt about moving has been removed and we plan to sell our house in the summer to avoid being taxed. And Michelle sent us this earlier this month. Apparently, Multnomah County plans to put to the voters another tax. I think we've had enough. But supporters of the tax say, whoa, 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 whoa. This is to help people stay in their homes. And that will in turn help the homeless crisis from getting any worse than it already is. But there are some big names among the local leaders who are already out against the tax. That includes Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler. Brittany Falkers has our story.
Unfortunately, eviction is one of the hardest things to come back from and leads to chronic homelessness.
Why have a tax on housing when we know we have an affordability crisis?
This May, voters will see Measure 26238 on the ballot, a new tax to provide free legal representation to people facing eviction. It would levy an adjustable countywide capital gains tax, initially set at 0.75%. It's a tax the federal government already collects based on the profit made from selling an investment. Anything from stocks, real estate, mutual funds, cryptocurrency, and other capital assets. Proponents, like Eviction Representation for All, hope the new tax will raise $12 to $15 million a year. Colleen Carroll is a volunteer organizer. She says the eviction process is complicated and difficult to navigate. This measure would provide early intervention before people are forced out.
These are important steps that allow people to stay in their homes and for us to reduce unnecessary evictions through supporting those tenants through whatever the issue is. But it's almost impossible for tenants to do that on their own.
The vote this May has been in the works for about 2 years. The Portland Business Alliance has been fighting it.
And so we got involved because here's a proposal that asks voters to raise taxes, and in large part on housing, in the middle of a housing crisis. And so it's our responsibility to stand up to proposals like this that may be well intended to help get tenants representation, but that impact the very thing that we know is driving our region to a place of unaffordability.
The Portland Business Alliance says the measure would have a dramatic impact on anyone trying to sell their home.
Any appreciation in that home since you purchased it, and at today's rates, that number is growing at a significant pace, you would be paying a tax on that gain between when you bought it and when you sell it.
Metro and Multnomah County voters already passed big income tax measures for the homeless and preschool for all. The next year, in 2021, more than 12,000 people moved out of Multnomah County. Some told us it was because of high taxes and not seeing much for it. But proponents say this tax and the legal representation it will provide is needed coming out of the pandemic, and with Oregon landlords able to raise rents by about 14% this year.
Eviction and displacement is a huge issue in our community. We know that tenants are struggling both before the pandemic, but then definitely through the pandemic, right? Every tenant is at risk of an eviction. We need to be able to address displacement in our community at every stage.
Brittany joins me now. All right, so supporters have enough signatures. This is going to be on the May ballot in Multnomah County. They've obviously have some support, but then there's been pushback too, right?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of pushback, and a lot of it comes from two major things. So this is an adjustable rate. So it starts at 0.75%, but that can change really depending on the county's annual reports. It could go up, it could decrease. Some analysis says that it will for sure go up. But then there's also the factor that this applies to everyone, no matter what your income level is.
Wow.
Local accounting firm Perkins & Co. did some major analysis of this, and here's what they had to say. They said, since the proposed local capital gains tax rate is not tied to income levels, taxpayers would be subject to this tax even if they were otherwise non-taxable for federal, Oregon, and other local tax purposes. So yes, we have the federal gains, capital gains tax. We have a state capital gains tax. But with this, there are exceptions, and it comes into different income brackets, right? With this capital gains tax, it doesn't matter what your income level is. So you might not be subject to that state capital gains. You might not be subject to that federal, but you will for sure be subject to this 0.75%. And that also includes retirees who might want to dip into their savings from retirement. If they do that, they could still be subject to this 0.75%.
My, oh my, I can hear people throwing things at their TV set or their computer screen right now. And I know that there's a number of political leaders that have come out against this, including the mayor and others.
Yeah, we've seen it from the mayor, Portland mayor, of course, Ted Wheeler, but then Metro Council President Lynn Peterson has also come out against it. And there seems to be a common thread here. It's that while this is well intended, it's just not the right plan. So this is what Lynn Peterson had to say in a statement here to KGW. She said, Measure 26238 is unnecessary, confusing, and expensive. It will create a new local tax on all Multnomah County residents, regardless of income or ability to pay, including seniors trying to afford retirement, small business owners who are investing in our community, and middle-class families. So she does say that she supports these types of measures. She says, you know, programs that have representation for low-income folks who are facing eviction is really important. She says, yes, these really do prevent homelessness, but there are already taxpayer-funded programs in place to do that. That includes the voter-approved supportive housing services measure. That affects individuals who make $125,000 or more, or couples who make $200,000 or more. So these are considered high earners here. Peterson's office also sent us some numbers looking into that specific program. And that's according to the Joint Offices of Homeless Services. They say in Multnomah County, emergency rent assistance and legal representation funded by the SHS tax, combined with other local, federal, and state funds, have prevented evictions for 9,320 people in Multnomah County in just the first 18 months. So big argument here is we already have a lot of taxes.
Yeah, do we need more? Do
we need more taxes? We already have programs in place that are being funded through local taxes combined with state and federal funds.
And that Lynn Peterson that you were quoting, she's the president of Metro, right? So which already handles some of those tax monies. So she certainly knows what she's talking about. And I think when she speaks, a lot of people listen.
Yes, definitely.
So it'd be interesting to see how this goes. All right. Thank you, Brittany. Great stuff as always. Hey, we'd love to hear what you think about this proposed tax. Are you sick and tired of tax after tax after tax? Or do you think this could really help folks stay in their homes and you're okay with it? Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Doesn't matter whether you're watching it live or watching it later, we want to hear from you. Now, let's turn to Portland's homeless crisis. And I hear those of you outside the city and Multnomah County groaning about our focus on the metro area tonight. But listen, many of these issues are present in your communities as well, so relax. Maybe they're on a smaller scale. There's still some learning to be done to try and find solutions in your neck of the woods, but work with us on this one. All right, back here in the Portland area, in the fall, city crews removed homeless camps from one side of Northeast 33rd Drive because it's near airport property, and, well, there were concerns that the camps violated federal aviation law. But now, 6 months later, the camps are back. I rode my bike through there on Saturday. It is an amazing sight, and it appears the cycle of removal, replace, repeat will continue. But is anything new being done to stop it? Blair Best reports.
This section of Northeast Portland near Marine Drive, once removed from the inner city, has turned into a makeshift homeless village.
If you're gonna live on the street, you gotta make it what it is.
The seemingly never-ending line of camps has been a recent focus for the city. This past fall, they towed vehicles from the east side of the street at the request of the Port of Portland. Randy, who lives in his car, was there when it happened.
They're just trying to pass the buck. Sadly, that's how it is.
Those camps on the east side were near the airport and potentially violated Federal Aviation Administration guidelines. They also fell under Mayor Ted Wheeler's ban on camping along high crash corridors. Now 6 months later, they're back.
I think it's a bunch of crap. Honestly, people can only park where they can. It's a good idea because otherwise you got trash on both sides.
Tim Coates ended up here after he was evicted from an RV park. Now he takes up a large stretch of the east side of the street.
I own that gray van right there. I own, this is gonna be my truck and my trailer. That van's mine. That Nissan 4x4 is mine. The motorhome's mine. The two vans in front of mine and the motorhome across the street's mine.
That's a lot of stuff.
I'm a hustler.
Why do you have all that stuff?
Why do I have it? Because I help homeless people out that have nothing.
Yet it's this buildup of cars and trailers that people like Claire, who lives on the opposite side, see as a sign of what's to come.
I feel like they're going to come in here and, make all of us move, here pretty soon.
You often hear from homeless people out here that they're not offered any resources or help getting off the street. However, the city sees it differently. About 6 months ago, when they removed the camps on this side of the street, they gave the homeless people a heads up and offered them shelter. Only 6 people took them up on that offer. Yet there are many homeless people out here who say it's drug use as the main reason they can't get out of this cycle.
We're not having to pay for, living here, they're letting us, and a lot of people take it, advantage of it.
If the city were to offer you a shelter bed, would you take it?
No.
Some have a plan of their own, even if it's not a long-term solution.
I'd move until it wasn't safe anymore, then I'd move back over.
The city is working with the Port of Portland to determine the next steps in this cleanup. Their goal is to have it cleared in the coming weeks. In Northeast Portland, Blair Best, KGW News.
That line of cars and RVs along Northeast 33rd is not new. It's been like that for a couple of years now. Blair helps bring us some of that context as well as something that surprised her while she was out gathering the story today.
All right, so I just wanted to share a little bit more background on this story. So about 2 years ago, the city actually moved some RVs and trailers from other parts of the city here to Northeast 33rd Drive because parking enforcement crews thought that would be the best idea at the time. Now, 2 years later, they're telling them they can't be on one side of the street and they have to move to the other side of the street because of potential FAA regulations. The other thing, while the city is working to remove all the camps on this side of the street, they tell me they might also be moving all the camps on the other side of the street as well. And something that's different this time that I'm out here talking with homeless people is typically, they're very angry that the city's going to come out and move them and they have no plan of what they're going to do if they get cleared. But this time, everyone I've talked to is understanding and they're like, yeah, it's a mess and the city should come out and clear it, which is honestly quite rare. You don't normally hear that. And the man who I talked with this morning, who has about 5 or 6 trailers on this one stretch, he has a plan. He's like, yep, if they come and tow me, I'm gonna tow my trailer away, bring my camper to the other side of the street, and he's just waiting on, I guess, some checks to come through, and then he says he'll be off the street pretty soon. So I don't know, just a different tone out here this time. People seem to be understanding and on board. There's anxieties and they're worried, but they seem to have a plan moving forward, which you don't often see.
All right, thank you, Blair. Hey, Oregon is well known for having some of the strongest protections in the country for abortion, but lawmakers are now working on a new bill that would raise that protection even higher. It would also expand access for gender-affirming care for transgender people. But some are saying, hold on, this goes too far, especially when it comes to kids. We'll explain why when the story returns. A big issue in last year's elections was abortion, and now Oregon lawmakers are working on a bill that would further protect the right to abortion in Oregon. It would also protect transgender people and their gender-affirming health care. House Bill 2002 would work to expand clinic infrastructure to provide more places in Oregon where people can get abortions and gender-affirming care. And it would expand legal protections for health care providers. It would protect them from losing their licenses for solely providing that kind of care. And it closes gaps in insurance coverage by requiring certain insurance providers to cover it. Supporters of the bill say many people in Oregon have to travel a long way to get their care. 3/4 of Oregon counties do not have any abortion providers, and 20% of people trying to get an abortion had to travel long distances. For transgender people, 75% do not live near a health care provider who has openings within a month. And supporters say many people are unable to cover the costs of either abortion or their gender-affirming treatment.
Significant barriers to the full spectrum of care still exist in our state for many communities, including low-income Oregonians, those living outside the I-5 corridor, women, LGBTQ+ individuals, Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, and people with disabilities. The outcomes where we got is we heard about many of the worst fears from the day of the Dobbs decision coming true. A common theme was that the amount of fear that is out there from both patients and providers, and a fundamental principle guiding this work for us was that every person's life has its own unique circumstances, no matter where they live or who they are. Someone, any of us may need an abortion someday, and people should have the right to make their own decisions on their health care.
This makes our community safer, healthier, and stronger. As a family physician, I know how important it is to guarantee every Oregonian's access to comprehensive, evidence-based health care and to protect those who provide that care. Reproductive and gender-affirming care are health care. Let me state that again. Reproductive and gender-affirming care are health care. They are not optional. They are not a choice. They are a fact of what people need, just like people need treatment for diabetes or high blood pressure. The vast majority of healthcare providers will tell you the same thing. Access to reproductive and gender-affirming care keeps our bodies, minds, and communities safe and healthy.
Many people have filed testimony against the bill. Some of them are concerned about the age that people would be allowed to seek out abortions or gender-affirming care. Under Oregon law, people over 15 are allowed to get lots of medical care without their parents' consent. This law would not change that, but it would prevent providers from disclosing that information without the child's signed consent.
What is overlooked is that decision-making capabilities vary depending on age and cognitive development. Children can certainly give assent to some concrete decisions, but decisions about with abstract implications for their health or their future should not be left to them without their parents' or guardians' involvement.
Now, we asked House Minority Leader Republican Representative Vicki Breese Iverson for a response to this. Late today, she told us, "I want to be clear. House Bill 2002 is an extreme partisan bill that puts parents' rights and the safety of our kids at risk. I'm disappointed after several assurances from the majority party to work together on Oregon's most pressing issues. This is now the issue at the forefront. House Bill 2002 is too extreme for Oregon." Thanks to all for your comments. Still to come on the story. In the first 6 months of 2022, fentanyl was the blame for overdose deaths of more than 330 people in the state of Oregon. That's nearly 2 overdose deaths every day. And now lawmakers in Salem are looking at recriminalizing fentanyl to sidestep what some call a loophole of Measure 110. We'll explain when the story returns. We're back in Salem for this next story, this time focusing on a bill that would increase penalties for people in possession of fentanyl and for those dealing that dangerous drug. District attorneys across the state say it would close a loophole and make treatment mandatory for those who are convicted under the new law if it passes. Tim Gordon has more.
There is plenty of debate about Oregon's voter-approved Measure 110, which decriminalized low-level drug possession even for hard drugs. But in the midst of a fentanyl epidemic, lawmakers are considering closing a gap that allows for possession of up to 5 grams of fentanyl before it's even a misdemeanor.
I think it's an absolute crisis. It is everywhere within your community.
Dan Primus is the top prosecutor in rural Umatilla County and president of the Oregon District Attorneys Association, which supports House Bill 2645, aimed at breaking the grip of fentanyl. In Umatilla County, with a population of 80,000, Primus says law enforcement seized a record 72,000 pills containing fentanyl last year and are on track to break that record in 2023, having already seized 54,000 pills.
It's something that we're seeing a steady increase of, and obviously we're seeing the consequence of it with the loss of life throughout the state.
We want to save lives, period. And this is a step towards how do we help do that.
At a committee hearing this week in Salem, lawmakers talked about the bill, which would make possession of from 1 to 5 grams of fentanyl a misdemeanor and anything more a felony. It also makes mandatory treatment a provision for offenders charged with possession.
And that's really kind of the hope as well, is to see what we can do about assisting individuals with treatment and going through the treatment process, because we know that is a gap. There's a gap there as well.
House Bill 2645 also sets penalty levels for pills containing fentanyl because that is the form it comes in most of the time. For those dealing the deadly drug, that means there could be tougher penalties, treating fentanyl dealers the same as heroin dealers in court.
You want to prevent those that are supplying and quite frankly killing those within your community with this addiction issue. And this bill allows for that as well.
Tim Gordon, KGW News.
The bill does currently have bipartisan support. The next step comes on Thursday when the Senate Committee on Judiciary has a work session to talk through the specifics of the bill. We'll keep you posted on its future. In the meantime, we'd like to hear from you. Let us know what you think about that measure. Is it targeting fentanyl in the right way? Is it the right move? Or would you like to see bills like this for all kinds of drugs? Let us know, will you? Send an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up, our team truly reads all of your messages, and here's your voicemails. Keep them coming. Keep it here. We're going to finish things up right after this.
Up next on KGW News, a Portland police employee who allegedly interfered in a homicide investigation heads to court.
How she's accused of helping her husband try and get away with a deadly attack. Plus, a popular chain, the Cracker Barrel, abruptly closes all of its local restaurants.
That's coming up at 6:30.
Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching and being here. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is